You are listening to Fantha Tracks.
Welcome to the inaugural episode of Making Tracks Reaction Crew. So if you haven't seen episode 1 and 2 of Skeleton Crew, which dropped today on Disney+, then pause the episode because this episode of Reaction Crew is going to trample all over the plot like we normally do. Since the fall of the Empire, the New Republic has maintained order, and yet remote hyperspace routes are increasingly plagued by piracy. These pirates are bold. They are branded on their armored hulls as a sign to all ships. It's either a case of surrender or die. Welcome to Reaction Crew.
Because of the following special program, Wonder Woman and the Incredible Hulk will not be presented this evening.
It's time to get all your Star Wars news in a single file.
That doesn't sound too hard.
This is Making Tracks.
This is the way.
Here are your hosts, Mark Newbold and Mark Mulcaster.
I know these people. They are brutal. Does this look Jedi to you?
That's not how the Force works.
They'll never see it coming.
Joining me on our quest to find our way back home to our little lonely planet is Mr. Mark Newbold. Dude, you've been lucky enough to have a screener of this. Cast your mind back to when you first saw the first couple episodes. What did you think? What was your first reaction?
My initial reaction was, this is so much fun. I was not blown away by how much fun it was because I was hoping it would be, with it being kids and with it being an era that we're familiar with. You know, it's in the Mandoverse, so it's within that sort of wheelhouse. It's post-Jedi. So I knew it would be interesting. And that Republic era, that New Republic era, in the same way that Mando has shown that the bounty hunters and the underworld and all of that aspects are sort of bubbling, and there's not the law, there's not the law that you had with the Empire, for example, enforcing restrictions and so on. It's kind of a wild, wild west. Now with pirates, you've learned that you've got the same sort of thing, and these kids get hurled into this scenario. So I was thrilled to bits. I was pleased that the kids were so well cast. I thought the music was great. I thought there's so many directorial nods, camera angles, little framings of things, which we'll get into, even words that people say. Hey, that's wizard. You know, there's lots of cool things in there. So I was really pleased. And just as a complete aside, not that it really matters, because everybody, you know, takes their own opinion on things as they should. But online so far, touch wood, it's been overwhelmingly positive.
To be honest, I sat down and the first thing I thought was it was really cool. There was a few people at the weekend actually like, oh, you know, you're looking forward to Skeleton Crew. And I'm like, yeah, I think I am. I think it's just going to be fun. And so already I had the positivity cap on. That is, I'm just going to sit down and just enjoy this. I don't think I can overthink about it. And I think the whole thing about this series is that, you know, even from what I've seen in the first time I've watched it, there's loads of layers of Easter eggs and everything else, which is great for us to get our teeth into. But it seems like it's just going to be a really fun, rip-roaring adventure. That I'm all for. It kind of feels like this is how Star Wars should be made, right?
When you think of a serialized Star Wars thing, we've talked about how we think Lando should be a series rather than a movie. And yeah. I look back and think if Solo, a Star Wars story, was happening 3 years later, it would have been on Disney Plus rather than being on the big screen. So a serialized adventure serial like that, which is very much in Lucas's wheelhouse, feels like the most Star Wars kind of thing he could do. And this has that vibe. You know, moving from that first episode straight into the second episode, you know, the way it flows, it's all go, go. You know, and those kids, they're so well cast. I've said that already, but they're so well cast that you kind of, you know, the boys are typical 10-year-old boys, the girls are typical 10-year-old girls. It's cats and dogs, you know, and so you've got that totally. Little, isn't it? You know, you've got that kind of vibe. You've got the suburbia of middle-class suburbia, you know, of Atatin, which I think is fascinating. Some people aren't mad keen on it, but I think it's really cool. And what did you think of the layout of the planet?
I thought it was really interesting because I think we kind of start to see very early on that you're kind of slightly lulled into this sense of security. You've got this whole notion that, you know, the kids, you know, I don't know how old they're meant to be, they're sitting down to do a test to decide their whole future.
Yes.
They're basically doing a careers form. But then, like, you look around the suburbia, and it's almost as if somebody, when they were designing this show, they kind of sat down and said, right, if you've sat in the mid to early 80s and you said, design me the suburban America of the future, say of 2025, what would it look like? And it kind of has that feel, which makes it kind of feel slightly dated, which is what you kind of need for Star Wars.
Yeah.
Slightly, obviously, forward thinking and futuristic, which also is what you need from Star Wars. Familiar, but obviously not quite so familiar. You've got, like, people walking loft cats and stuff like that. And also it seems like it's a very kind of planned, slightly sterile environment, if I'm honest. It didn't kind of feel like, your Tatooines and your really run down kind of places. It didn't obviously feel like your ultra crisp and high modern edge of Coruscant, but it just felt a bit soulless. Like, yeah, okay, so you're going to be an administrator.
Yeah.
And so that's what you're going to be trained to do. If you follow that thought through, you then go, well, then actually probably everything on that planet has a purpose. And barring probably the kids' toys, there's probably nothing created just for amusement or for fun, as it were. It's always like, all the cars seem to be on like kind of like rails and stuff. The bikes aren't, but like, so everybody's obviously, you get on the rail and you go from one place to another, like you kind of do at like an Epcot or something, which then obviously is a great juxtaposition to kind of then have these kids who are all kind of slightly rebelling in their own way jump off onto this adventure.
Hi, this is David W. Collins, voice actor for Star Wars and sound designer at Skywalker Sound. You are listening to Fantha Tracks.
If we hadn't have actually had Andor as well, where we'd seen like a similar kind of level on Coruscant, when we go to Cyril's mum's house, and the decor doesn't look that dissimilar. And obviously he sits down and eats a cereal, Matt, and we see that in the first episode. So it didn't feel as jarring to me as maybe I was expecting.
Yeah, I agree. I like the look of it. I thought the layout was cool. It reminded me a bit of E.T. in that when they're on the bikes and they're sort of they're chasing away at the end and they go through the new part of the housing estate, you can see, it's clearly the people haven't moved in yet when they're going up and down the hills. And this had that kind of vibe as well. I like the drop curbs. You think, why would you have drop curbs in Star Wars? That makes no sense. And then you realise, as you said, all the vehicles are on kind of runners, almost like trams nearly.
Yeah.
So that was interesting. I like the sort of the uniformity of that you know exactly the way to go to work because there's no way of going off the rails. So it's a very regimented society. So you can see why these kids are so bored and want to get away. But of course, as we see later in the episode, when they do get away, they're panicking. They've all got their own unique family situations. We haven't yet really seen KB, the girl with the visor, but we see Fern, that her mom is quite an important lady. She comes into the school when they're doing their little test things. Wim's dad, the mom's not around. We don't know whether she's left or whether she passed or what the story is there. And obviously Neil is the one with the loving mom and dad and the two little kids who like watching the holiday special, which was great.
Yeah. It is that very kind of Goonies ET kind of vibe, isn't it? Like, wasn't Elliot's mum but his dad's not around.
That's right, divorced,
And it's a whole kind of thing, isn't it? Of like, a single parent family, the lone parent basically ends up working loads. And you see this loads in many, many shows and films of all eras and stuff. One of the main protagonists is a little bit neglected. And then, as you said, Fern, her mum being, I don't know, I can't remember, was it like the grand poobah of a planet or whatever it is.
One of the administrators,
Yeah, exactly. So you could imagine from a very young age, it was all about duty. And I mean, she even goes on to say about like how, not everybody can be at the top. And so it's obvious and it's only natural for her to be kind of pushing against that. And that's why she's kind of racing the speed of bikes, which looked cool. And ironically, didn't really look that dissimilar to what we really saw in the Book of Boba Fett, but actually in that environment, in this planet, it kind of worked. And I think that was one of the big things that we kind of said at the time when we were watching Book of Boba Fett. It was like they just looked so out of place that that's probably why they did it, but also it was so jarring. But here in this instance, in this setting, they've got the balance, I reckon, just about right. I don't think you could probably do it any other way. And of course, we get to see Win chowing down on some space crunchy chocolate things with I think it looked like green milk. So I don't know if that's come from a freshly milked phallus siren somewhere, maybe he isn't aware of where it's come from either.
Probably best he doesn't. That whole vibe, like you say, the different situations with the kids. We've not seen KB yet, like I say, but the other kids you sort of see there, how they're laid out. And Wim, I mean, it doesn't look like he's wanting for anything. You know, it looks like his dad's obviously a hard worker, and they've got a nice house, and he's got everything you want. There's the droid in the house doing the cleaning, and all, you know, and the droid in the yard doing the yard, and all those different things. So I don't think they're hard up or anything, but it's exactly like you said. He's not neglected, but he wants more. Yeah, he wants his mom to read him a bedtime story, and his dad's going, "You're a bit old for that, aren't you?"
Exactly, but you've got that, you know, that lovely scene, which was maybe a little bit too kind of hallmarky on the nose, if no pun intended, with Neil's family when he kind of comes home and his parents both come and greet him and give him a hug and stuff. And I think that was fair to kind of push that kind of notion about it's like that's the perfect family on some levels, but obviously that will then also Neil's probably also then actually maybe slightly smothered by that, and therefore hasn't necessarily got the autonomy that say Wim does, and that which is kind of why these double acts work. And that whole fun lightsaber duel when they met, that was just really, I mean, there's just so many nice little touches, like, you know, as you kind of mentioned about, like, they had taken scenes or script lines from, you know, the original trilogy, and they've tweaked it a little bit, as if somebody's maybe misremembered it, maybe, or it's, you know, a different context. I mean, that whole opening scene with the pirates, you could say it's a direct lift, but I think it's fair. It's an homage to, you know, the opening in New Hope. Like you said, you've got the guys defending the ship, kind of looking around as if like what's happening and stuff like the Rebel Fleet troopers did. But I can remember reading somewhere at some point that George Lucas kind of said that the sequel trilogy would be about piracy. It would be literally about the New Republic having to, you know, not have a big bad, but having to deal with these pirates. So I think it's always that thing, isn't it? Like, you know, we saw it even in Revenge of the Sith, these big capital ships, when they're actually up against one another, they're fighting as if they're in the sea, you know, they're close quarters, and you've got those pirates flying over, like literally using grappling hooks and kind of like flying over with blow up a blaster turrets and stuff like that. They've done some really well thought out kind of like nods to like the original trilogy, but also some of those other kind of influences that fed into George's kind of mind to begin with. So like, you know, pirate serials and stuff like that, obviously as well as the Goonie ambling kind of aspects, which everybody's kind of picking up on quite easily, which I think is great. I
love the opening in the sense that a lot of people are thinking, this is a show for kids. I mean, all Star Wars is a show for kids, really, but this is pitched at kids. That opening was not.
Yes, it was as if they'd gone, well, look, you know, we're going to be pushing this towards kids, so let's remind everybody from the beginning that this is Star Wars. This can be a little bit edgy, and I think that was quite good. So I think that kind of actually set the tone, actually. And also then when you do go and see the pirates later on, you kind of suddenly get, you know, you're aware how dangerous these pirates are, even if the kids aren't to begin with.
Yeah. So, I mean, you hear the guy get spaced, you know, you hear him get shoved out the airlocks, you know, the blaster fire everywhere. You see Captain Brutus take down that guy that's running away by shooting him in the back. So there's plenty of full-on stuff. And then you hop to, you know, these other locales where it's just people living a regular life. It's just people going and living in a regular place.
You don't kind of necessarily think about it until they find a ship. You know, the whole notion that is there something slightly untoward about the planet? Be fair, it's a bit of like a Star Trekian kind of like vibe, isn't it? Like, you know, this planet that is either hidden or the inhabitants have cut themselves off. It's starting to feel already, we're only 2 episodes in, quite layered and textured.
For everything in one location, daily news, reviews, interviews, podcasts, video, and social media feeds, bookmark FanthaTracks.com for Star Wars news 24/7, 365.
You've got these two opposing forces. You've got the girls and the boys, and so after Wim finds the ship, after he kind of falls down, and probably my only criticism to that little scene, for the first time he finds it and stuff, that felt very like it's been shot on a volume. That was my only one critique of the whole two episodes. Was like that felt. I was like, that looks a little bit flat. The convenience of how he, you know, finds it and that side, I think it's fine in this kind of context. It doesn't need to be kind of like clever or anything. It's like it's really nice how when you see those two groups have that shorthand about what do they say about like, finders keepers kind of thing? That kind of claimsies. That's it. Like, and it's like the claimant has to be there, and it's just like, what was that?
Yeah.
But it's like to them, it's just like, well, this is obviously how it is. It's like squibs, It's like, yeah, you can't do it because I've got squibs. So, fine.
Again, there, he misses his test at school. So it's a regular kids thing. And I loved, so many clever little scenes. Neil sitting there gazing at the girl he's got a crush on, things like that, which was hilarious. And the droid teachers, which I liked, the firm droid teacher, when Wim doesn't turn up because he's taking his shortcut. And Neil's panicking on his behalf because he knows how important this test is. And again, the setup of the world of At-Atin, we know there's a shot when the camera sort of pans up and you see the green of the skies, that's the green of the skies, but you see those little red dots. So there's clearly things up in the air that are keeping that world hidden. And as soon as, we're hopping around the episodes, but as soon as they get to, I think it's Port Borgo, I think that was the name of the port, the pirate port, when they're there, and the word At-Atin is mentioned, at first people are like, no, seriously, where are you from? And then suddenly it's like, hang on, they start to get a sense that, wow, there's something in this. So the kids become valuable because of where they're from, what they're, what that represents. And it clearly means a lot to pirates. It's a pirate thing.
Yeah, exactly. And it'll be interesting to see if this is just one of those weird kind of myths.
The great work is the phrase they use, isn't it?
Fern's mum, she says, or something like, remember we all have a place in the great work, which is straight out of the High Republic. The Chancellor's great works was like Starlight Beacon, and the fair and stuff like that, or whatever, the expo.
They've got Republic credits.
At that point, you kind of start to question, have they literally closed themselves off? Are they even aware that there's been a whole galactic civil war and the Clone Wars? Clearly, somebody's getting used because there's like a communications center on the planet. One of the Aurebesh signs is like for communications. So somebody's probably getting that. It's probably like, the government, they know what's going on, and then they're probably choosing to not relay it to the rest of the populace because like ignorance is bliss, isn't it? Right. So these pirates maybe have heard some story. Oh yeah. Many moons ago, there was this kind of planet and it was inhabited and they're really rich. But you don't really get the sense of that they're really rich on the planet as such in the grand scheme of things, or at least where Wind's from anyway. Maybe there might be other parts of the planet that are like, rolling in it like Canto Bight kind of credits. But I suppose obviously if there's a planet that's been untapped for resources and everything else, that's potentially where the riches are. And maybe the pirates, when they get there, a bit like when they open up the hold and there's only one credit, might be a bit disappointed. And
it makes you wonder, that captain at the beginning, which you kind of think that's probably Jude Law's character at the beginning, even down to the voice. It sounds like him with a mask on to me. So you assume that that's him, and clearly things haven't gone well in terms of leading that group of pirates. And by the end of the second episode, you're introduced to him when he uses the Force, and you hear the Force rumble, so you're assuming it is the Force, to get the key. It's going to be interesting to see how that all falls together, because the whole setup of the show is pirates. It's going to be very interesting to see how all of that element works to bring all these things together.
I'm kind of maybe expecting at some point a double cross and then a reconsidering of the double cross, and he comes back round that. But that's fine. That's kind of like, I'm not expecting that to be like a big twist and stuff. I'm not really expecting any major twists in this really. So check in next week when I'm proved totally wrong.
What did you think though? SM33. Let's pick a couple of characters to focus on.
Yeah.
SM33. Nick Frost. Great job. I thought it was a great design. I love the rat in the eye.
Fantastic design. Yeah, it's quite interesting to kind of have this pirate droid, like this pirate first mate droid. I thought that was quite fun. I mean, I don't think you could get much more beaten up with that little kind of, I don't know what it was, that little rat caterpillar thing living in his eye and stuff like that. It was
Ratapilla.
Ratapilla, there you go, that's it.
We've named him, there you go.
But yeah, I mean, there's always that thing, isn't it? When somebody well-known is casting a voice role, but they don't normally do voices and stuff like that, and it's kind of made slightly a big thing that actually is in it. Yeah. Sometimes it takes a little while. It took a little while for me to kind of hear past from Nick Frost.
Yes.
And then just kind of hear the character. But by the second episode, I was like, I'm just kind of hearing SM33, not really Nick Frost. Partly because he didn't swear, I think.
Yeah, it could be that.
I mean, I'm sure Brian is absolutely beside himself with joy. That there's just an absolute wealth of and plethora of droids, as you kind of already said. Like the whole place is just teeming full of droids. And it kind of goes back to that kind of notion that I think you kind of have in Star Wars, whereby you have one droid, but it serves one purpose. So you've got Rex, haven't you, kind of driving the buses and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And then you've got different patrol droids, and then like the teacher droids and that. And then, you know, the ones that kind of sounded like the old Smash adverts and stuff like that. I should think
That's literally, wasn't it? It was the Smash droid, wasn't it?
Totally. I mean, that's really cool. And I know a few droid builders who will be very excited to kind of start putting together some of those as static props.
Hello, this is Sam Whitwer, and you are listening to Fantha Tracks.
We do have a tendency to kind of see maybe one or two types of droids in a show, but they've really expanded the lexicon of like droids. Droids aside, just like that opening scene again was just like a who's who of Star Wars scum and villainy when it comes to like, you know, Cantina aliens and stuff like that. It was just like, you know, there's so many different aliens, and we were kind of starved of OT era aliens in the sequel trilogy.
Very
and then
much.
suddenly this, like, we've been kind of gifted with this again, which is, I mean, I guess that might be one of those things. It's down to the creators and the writers who've kind of like, who grew up with Walrus Man and, you know, Wolfman and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And they're kind of putting them back in, you know, different kind of versions of stuff.
I was curious as well when we saw the ship, the pirate ship, the main vehicle, the Onyx Cinder, you know, how that would look, because all we'd seen really before this was the Lego version. And there's, you know, seeing something in Lego before you see the real thing is a bit of a weird thing. Now the Lego makes sense. Now we've seen the ship, the big turning engines and the size of it. One little detail I loved, every time you see that ship jump to hyperspace, was it leaves a little cloud of dirt behind it.
Yeah, dirt and dust. Yes, I thought that was really cool. Even when it was leaving the planet, it had those I think they were like, they're more like landing lights.
Yeah.
But it kind of gave me that vibe of like E.T.'s ship and like Close Encounters ship kind of like leaving, because this, you know, suddenly Wynn's dad is just kind of left there, kind of like, you know, you can almost imagine like he would get blown off his feet or something like that, you know, when it kind of.
You see all the fire, don't you? The fire from the engines into the forest.
Yeah,
it's a proper battered old ship, and inside clearly there's been fights inside, and you know, half the crew's turned into skeletons. So you're thinking, how long has this thing been here? KB gets it up and running. Wim, typical kid, can't resist pushing buttons. I mean, like strap him down. Like when he finds the whole, you know, the whole self-destruct button, then don't push that, you know. And you're thinking, I wish he hadn't told him that, because you just know he's good. That the green button when he pushes it and they all leap to hyperspace. You know, so all these things that are like typical kid, even though he's been told. It's short round in Temple of Doom, isn't it? You know,
it totally is. Yeah,
stand over there and don't touch anything.
I think it's when who discovers like SM33 and like Giacchino's music kind of like is very kind of like One-Eyed Willy. When we enter that ship, the whole kind of like music score is very, very Goonies, that kind of like World of Wonders and stuff. So but that's what you want. That's where the fun is, isn't it? It's like, don't touch a button. You know he's going to touch a button, and probably at some point somebody's going to have to use that self-destruct button at some point. That's, you know, it's kind of Pavlov's self-destruct button, really, isn't it? In some respects, but kind of a pirate base that they go to is really interesting, and I'm really curious to find out more about the nightclub girl. Or it was a nightclub.
She was like Ristel, wasn't she, from Special Editions? She was like Jabba's dancer, but with different colours.
Yeah, she was green. Yeah, it had green,
blue, wasn't she?
Right?
Yeah,
blue and green. Yeah,
yeah.
I kind of think that might have been more of like a brothel, more than anything.
Yeah,
just because it's you know, and I'm not sure Fern quite knew what it was, but I think she knew that it's probably best to not go in there. I mean, you know. Or can kind of get away with it a little bit, but going to a strip club. But probably Skeleton Crew going into like a knocking shop, probably not.
Bit off. But I mean, Star Wars, you know, so we all know Han Solo was a drug smuggler. He was a rebel hero, but he was also a drug smuggler. There's no getting away from it. So, you know, these characters have done some sort of questionable things over the years.
You know, it's a pirate port. It's a secret pirate port, you know, full of scum and villainy and what you wouldn't expect anything else, you know.
You see a bit of everything, Yeah,
exactly. You see like an 88 droid turning its hand as being a tattooist and stuff like that. And I don't think there's really anything bad we can say about the show, really.
No.
So far, you know, the first 2 episodes, fingers crossed. Let's hope that it doesn't suddenly take a massive, sharp turn for the worst. What I've seen online so far to say has been very, very much goodwill and stuff. And everybody seems to, if they're not like loving it, they're at least enjoying it. Maybe they've managed the expectations pretty well as to what this show is.
And it feels like it's sneaked up on people in a nice way, you know. But now this has come out and people seem ready for just a fun Star Wars adventure. And it helps that the kids are just so good that it's... we met them last week, so we know what they're like. You know, they're very much...
They're awesome.
They're the kids on screen, aren't they? It's totally there.
You know, the chemistry is just wicked. So I think probably about all the time we have got for this episode of Reaction Crew. As always, if you want to get in touch, you can either send your thoughts, theories, or comments about what we're going to see in Skeleton Crew, or any other kind of question you've got about Star Wars.
Email radio@fanthatracks.com. Head to links.fanthatracks.com for links to our social media feeds, Fantha Tracks TV and Fantha Tracks Radio. Thanks to James Semple for the Fantha Tracks intro, Blues Harvest for our Making Tracks opening music, and Mark Daniel and Vanessa Marshall for our voiceovers. New episodes drop Tuesdays and Fridays at 7 o'clock UK time. Our weekly news show, Good Morning Tatooine, goes live Sundays at 9 o'clock UK time on Facebook and YouTube. And remember, Fantha Tracks is absolutely free, so it costs nothing to stay updated on all the latest Star Wars news.
Coming up next on Fantha Tracks Radio, it's another episode of Making Tracks.